When I was in my early 20s, I used to work the night shift at a small motel on the edge of town. It wasn't a busy place, especially in winter. Most of our guests were just passing through, travelers needing a cheap place to crash for the night. The motel had this quiet, almost lifeless vibe. Sometimes, hours would pass without me seeing anyone. I didn't mind it though. It was easy money, and I could keep myself entertained with a book or my phone. I still think about one night though, the kind of thing that stays with you no matter how much time passes. It was around midnight. I was at the front desk, doing what I usually did, scrolling through my phone to kill time. It had snowed earlier, and the parking lot was empty except for a couple of cars. The heater hummed in the background, and everything felt normal. That's when I heard her scream. It wasn't just any scream. It was sharp, terrified, and sent me bolting from my chair. It came from one of the rooms upstairs. I ran toward the sound without thinking twice. When I got to the door, it was locked from the outside. That didn't make any sense. The housekeeper was inside, still screaming. I yelled for her to calm down, to tell me what happened. She was crying so hard it took her a minute to get the words out. She said, "Get me out. The key is in the supply closet." I sprinted back to the closet, grabbed the master key, and rushed back to unlock the door. When I opened it, she practically fell into the hallway. Her face was pale, and she looked like she might pass out. She kept saying, "I didn't lock it. I didn't lock it." I asked her to take a deep breath and tell me what was going on. She pointed back into the room, shaking. I stepped inside and immediately smelled it, a foul, rancid odor that made my stomach churn. The air was heavy with it. On the bed, there was something covered by the comforter. "What's under there?" I asked. She just shook her head, backing away. I pulled the comforter back, and I swear my heart skipped a beat. It was a stuffed doll, but not the kind you'd find in a store. This thing was huge, almost the size of a person, with crude stitching and a twisted, ugly face. Its eyes were these shiny black buttons, and its grin looked stitched on. The smell was coming from it. I don't know what was inside, but it wasn't normal stuffing. The housekeeper whispered, "It wasn't here before. I clean this room every week. No one stayed here in a month." That made it worse. The room was on the 3rd floor. The windows were locked from the inside. There was no sign anyone had been in there. And yet, there it was. She told me that when she finished cleaning, she turned to leave, but the door wouldn't open. It was locked from the outside. She hadn't touched it, and there was no way it could have locked itself. We checked the security cameras later. The footage was clear. She went in, and no one else entered or left. At one point, the door slammed shut by itself. There was no one there. The next morning, we told the manager. He didn't want us making a big deal about it. He said it was probably a bad prank and told us to move on. But I couldn't shake it. There was no one in that room for weeks. There was no way anyone could have gotten in or out. The doll was gone by the time I checked back later. The manager must have had someone get rid of it, but to this day, I still think about it. I don't think it was a prank. Something about it felt wrong. Like it wasn't just a bad joke. Something else put that thing there, and it locked her in with it. I've always wanted to travel. Growing up, I'd see pictures of faraway places in magazines and dream of seeing them myself one day. By the time I saved enough to make it happen, I decided Egypt would be my first trip abroad. Most of the journey was amazing. Historic landmarks, incredible food, and meeting kind people along the way. But my last stop in Cairo left me with a memory I'd rather forget. I'd planned to spend my final few days in Cairo. I had a hotel booked and was excited to explore the bustling streets and taste the beautiful food. But things started to go wrong as soon as I arrived. The hotel cancelled my reservation out of the blue and refunded my payment. There was no explanation. Suddenly, I found myself in a foreign city with nowhere to stay. It was the 90s, so I couldn't just check an app or website to book something new. I had to find a place the old-fashioned way, walking around and asking at hotels. Most of the places I tried were fully booked. After hours of searching, I stumbled upon a small motel. It looked run down, but I was desperate. The woman at the front desk greeted me and said they had only one room left on the 3rd floor. She didn't give me much of a choice, and I was too tired to argue. I noticed a lot of the rooms seemed empty though. When I asked about it, she smiled and said the guests hadn't arrived yet. Something about her answer didn't sit right with me, but I was too exhausted to think much about it. The motel didn't have an elevator, so I had to climb 3 flights of creaky stairs to reach my room. By the time I got there, I was completely drained. The room was basic, just a bed, a small dresser, and a phone. The air felt heavy, like the room hadn't been aired out in weeks, but I didn't care. I collapsed on the bed and fell asleep for a while. Later, I woke up feeling a bit better and decided to go out for dinner. When I got back, there was a man at the front desk instead of the woman I'd seen earlier. Something about him made me uneasy. He stared at me for a moment before giving a stiff smile. I quickly said hello and headed upstairs, but I felt like he was watching me the whole time. As I climbed the dimly lit stairs, I noticed how quiet the motel was. All the rooms were closed, and the faint yellow light barely lit the hallway. I felt exposed. My footsteps echoed as I walked to my door, and just as I reached it, I sensed someone behind me. I turned, and there he was, the man from the front desk. He was holding a cup. He smiled awkwardly and, in broken English, said it was a welcome gift from the motel. He insisted I take it and try it right away. My stomach churned. Something felt wrong, but I didn't want to upset him, so I thanked him and took the cup to my room. I locked the door and slid a chair under the handle for extra security. The juice sat on the dresser untouched. I was almost certain it wasn't safe to drink. I couldn't relax. The uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. I tried to sleep, but kept jolting awake at every sound. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and deliberate. Then I heard whispers, male voices, low and indistinct. My heart raced. I reached for the phone, but it didn't work. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want them to think I was asleep, so I made a point of moving around, hoping they'd hear me. After a few minutes, the whispers stopped, and I heard footsteps moving back down the stairs. I stayed awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the door until morning. As soon as the sun came up, I grabbed my bag and left the room. My hands were shaking as I made my way down the stairs. I half expected someone to jump out at me, but the lobby was empty. I walked out without looking back, vowing never to stay in a motel again. If I had to sleep at a train station in the future, I would. Anything would be better than that night. I travel a lot for work, so staying in hotels has become second nature to me. Over the years, I've gotten used to the quirks of different places, thin walls, weird smells, noisy neighbours. But there was one time, not so long ago, that I had the most unsettling experience of my life. It happened in a quiet hotel near Barcelona. My job had sent me there for a few days. The place was old, with antique furniture that gave it a kind of charm. It wasn't fancy, but it was cozy. Honestly, I thought I'd lucked out, because it seemed like the perfect place to rest after long workdays. The first night, I went to bed early. I was exhausted from travelling, so I didn't waste time unpacking or exploring. I got to my room, took a quick shower, and went straight to bed. The bed was comfortable enough, and the room was silent, no traffic noise or loud guests. I don't know what time it was, but I woke up to loud banging on my door. Groggy and confused, I stumbled out of bed and opened it. Standing there was a man and a woman. The man, who said he worked at the hotel, introduced the woman as someone staying in the room next to mine. He said I'd been making noise and keeping her awake. That didn't make any sense. I told him I'd been asleep since I got into bed, but they didn't seem to believe me. The woman looked annoyed, and the man just shrugged and said I should keep it down because she had work early in the morning. Then they left. It was weird, sure, but I figured maybe I'd been snoring or something. I locked the door and went back to bed. Not long after, I woke up again, this time to a noise coming from the dresser across the room. It sounded like something shifting inside, like someone moving things around. I got up, turned on the light, and checked. Nothing. The dresser was empty, just as I'd left it. I felt uneasy, but I tried to shake it off. I was about to turn off the light when I felt it, something cold on the back of my neck. It was like a hand, but it vanished the second I spun around. My heart was pounding. I was sure someone was in the room. I grabbed my phone and went straight to the front desk. I told the staff member on duty that I thought there was an intruder in my room. He took me seriously and came back with me to check. We searched the room thoroughly. There was nothing out of place, no sign of anyone else being there. The staff member said the building was old, so it creaked sometimes, and maybe that's what I heard. He also mentioned that if someone had been knocking earlier, it could have been other guests. When I told him about the man and the woman, he looked confused. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. The room next to mine was empty. Not only that, but the staff working that night were all women except for him, and he'd been at the desk the whole time. I asked him again, just to be sure, but he insisted there was no one matching the description I gave. Then, hesitating a bit, he mentioned that some guests claimed the hotel was haunted. He shrugged it off as rumors and left me alone. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Every noise, every shadow kept me on edge. The next morning, I checked out early and found another hotel. I don't know what I experienced that night, whether it was ghosts or something else, but I'll never forget it. I'm not the type to travel much. I work remotely, so I rarely need to leave my apartment. But last year, I decided I needed a break. I wanted somewhere quiet, away from the noise of the city. I found a traditional lodge in the Atlas Mountains because I was living somewhere North Africa. It was small, family-run, and affordable. It seemed perfect. The place was beautiful, isolated, and exactly what I was looking for. The owner and his wife were welcoming, and the food was home-cooked and delicious. There weren't many other guests, just a couple passing through, and an older man who mostly kept to himself. As an introvert, I liked it that way. There was just one thing that made me uneasy. A woman in her late 30s was always wandering around. She mumbled to herself constantly. At first, I thought she might be a guest, but when I asked the owner, he told me she was his sister. He said she was mentally ill but harmless. I tried to be understanding. She didn't do anything alarming at first, just followed me around. I'd catch her watching me, but she never spoke or got too close, so I ignored her. The first 2 nights were uneventful. I spent my days hiking, reading, and enjoying the peace. At night, I'd fall asleep to the sounds of the mountains. It was everything I'd wanted. On the 3rd night, I went to bed like usual. The room was dimly lit, with only a small lamp casting a faint glow. I woke up sometime in the early hours and immediately felt like something was off. I wasn't alone. My heart skipped a beat when I saw someone sitting on the other side of the bed. It was her. She was just sitting there, looking the other way. I froze. My brain couldn't process what was happening. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Finally, I managed to whisper, "Excuse me?" She turned to face me. Her expression was wild, her eyes wide and angry, and then she started screaming. Not just screaming, she was accusing me of hitting her, yelling things I couldn't even fully understand. Before I could react, she lunged at me, grabbing and biting me. I panicked. I shoved her off and bolted for the door. She chased after me, still screaming. I ran into the hallway, and the noise woke everyone up. The owner and his wife came out, followed by the other guests. The owner grabbed her and managed to calm her down. His wife apologized over and over, and the guests just stood there, looking horrified. The owner explained that she had episodes like this sometimes. He said he was sorry, that he didn't think it would happen again, and offered me a refund. I couldn't stay another night. I packed my things right then and left as soon as it was light out. Even now, I can't get that image of her sitting there in the dark out of my head. It's been months, and I still wake up some nights thinking she's in the room with me. I used to work as a housekeeper at an old hotel. I took the job because it was close to home, and the hours were flexible. I had bills to pay and not many other options. The hotel wasn't in the best shape, but it had character. Most of the guests were tourists or business travelers who didn't stay long. Everything changed when a young woman took her own life on the 3rd floor. She wasn't discovered until 5 days later. The whole place reeked of death for weeks. The police came and went, and the room was sealed off for a while. After that, no one wanted to stay on that floor. The rooms were always empty, but we still had to clean them because they got dusty. Everyone who worked at the hotel hated going up there. It felt wrong, like the air was heavier. But the rooms needed to be cleaned, and it was part of the job. I usually saved the third floor for last, hoping I could finish quickly and leave. One night, I was doing my usual cleaning routine. I started on the first floor and worked my way up. By the time I got to the third floor, it was late. The hallway was dimly lit, and it felt colder than the rest of the building. I tried to ignore it and started with the room at the end of the hall. As I was cleaning the bathroom, I heard the shower turn on in the next room. At first, I thought it was a maintenance issue, maybe a leak or something. But then I heard humming, low, soft humming. I froze. I could see the shadow of someone moving under the door. My heart raced. I knew no one was supposed to be there. I started screaming and ran downstairs to the front desk. One of the workers, who was also a friend, went up with me to check. When we got there, the water was still running, but the room was empty. We even checked the security cameras. They showed nothing, only me going about my work. The next morning, my supervisor called me into his office. He was upset. He said I caused a scene and scared the guests. Some of them had cancelled their stays for the next few days. He wanted to dismiss me from the job. I didn't even argue with him. I never wanted to go back to that hotel again. That was the last time I ever stepped foot in that place. To this day, I can't explain what happened. I just know I'll never forget it. I heard this story from a friend of mine. It didn't happen to me, but it stuck with me ever since she told me. She's not the type to make stuff up, and honestly, the way she described it, it gave me chills. She'd been sent to another city for work, one of those last-minute assignments that no one wants to take. Her company booked her a room in some mid-range hotel. Not fancy, but decent enough. She got there late, exhausted after a full day of traveling and meetings. She told me she barely had the energy to check in, let alone explore the place or notice anything about the room beyond the bed. It was on the first floor, which already made her uneasy. She's not a fan of ground-level rooms, but it was late and she just wanted to sleep. After dropping her bags, she went straight to the bathroom to shower. She's got this habit of bringing her phone with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She'll scroll through memes, videos, whatever, while brushing her teeth or drying her hair. That night, it was just her way of unwinding after a long day. So, she's in the shower, scrolling on her phone, wasting time like usual. She said she heard it so clearly, footsteps in the room. At first, she thought maybe she was imagining it, but then there was another sound, like something being moved. She froze, turned off the water, and listened. It wasn't her imagination. Someone was in the room. She didn't even have to think about it. She locked the bathroom door immediately. Then she grabbed her phone, hands shaking, and called the hotel's front desk. She had their number saved from the booking app, thank God. She whispered to the person who answered, telling them someone was in her room and she was locked in the bathroom. They told her to stay put and that they were coming up right away. She said it felt like forever, but it was probably only a couple of minutes before she heard voices outside her door, knocking and telling her it was safe to come out. When she opened the bathroom door, the room was empty, no sign of anyone. The window, though, was wide open. The first floor, remember? Someone had climbed in through the window. The hotel staff was freaked out, but they didn't want to call the police. They begged her not to make a scene, saying it would scare the other guests. They gave her a full refund and moved her to a different room on a higher floor. She didn't argue, she just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. She told me she spent the rest of the night double-checking the locks on the new door and window, even though it was on the 5th floor. She doesn't know what the person was planning to do. Maybe it was a robbery, or maybe it was something worse. Either way, she said if she hadn't had her phone with her and stayed in the bathroom those extra minutes, who knows what could have happened. It's terrifying to think about how close she came. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future content. I'd love to hear your thoughts. so drop a comment below. It really helps and motivates me to keep creating more videos for you. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.